Most people at some point in their lives have quit a job, know what it feels like to become fed up with a particular position or role they have as a means of employment for one reason or another, whether it's due to a lack of proper compensation, lack of enjoyment, a feeling that their work goes unnoticed or unappreciated, or the simple matter of their job conflicting too heavily with other responsibilities found within their personal life. In the case of Peter Parker, it was a combination of all of these factors that forced him to quit his job as superhero, crime fighter, within the historic 1967 storyline Spider-Man No More, which spanned issues number 50 to 52 of The Amazing Spider-Man, written by Stan Lee, with art by John Romita Sr. The splash page found on page 8 of issue number 50 is one of the most memorable and impactful in Marvel history, all of comics history really. It depicts the iconic moment when Peter officially quit being Spider-Man and throws his costume in the trash. Having a superhero of Spider-Man's caliber give up like this in such a visually striking way had never been done before in the medium, not on this scale. I think it shocked the entire comic book world when it happened, and further established Spidey as one of the most realistic and relatable heroes in comics at the time. The entire landscape of the comics industry was changing quickly throughout the 1960s. Grounded stories with down-to-earth conflicts affecting their characters, like those found in Spider-Man No More, were what audiences were connecting with and embracing more than any other. Spider-Man No More sees Peter become immensely frustrated, sick and tired of what J. Jonah Jameson's editorials at the Daily Bugle have done to his reputation, labeling him a menace, or just plain crazy, for the costume he wears and the seemingly frightening abilities he possesses. Spider-Man has become feared by the populace of the city he has chosen to protect. The more he helps them, the more they end up hating him due to Jameson's slanderous articles. Peter is envious of many other superheroes in the New York area, like the Fantastic Four, Daredevil, and the Avengers, that get enormous praise for all their heroic actions, whereas Spider-Man does not. He finds it unfair. Peter's personal life has been drastically affected by his responsibilities as Spider-Man. He has had no time to hang out with friends, or love interests like Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane. Despite having one of the finest records in science his professor had ever seen, Peter's grades at school have been slipping because he has been missing class in order to stop crimes. He also had to turn down a dream job, working at a chemistry lab at Oscorp, because it would force him to work nights and interfere with his nightly patrol as Spider-Man. Recently, his Aunt May had suffered some sort of medical attack while he was out fighting crime as well, preventing him from being there when she needed him the most. The vexations in Peter's life, all stemming from him being Spider-Man, reached their pinnacle when J. Jonah Jameson, like the madman he is, puts out a $1,000 reward on live television for the capture and conviction of Spider-Man, who he continues to label as a threat to the entire city, a mentally disturbed egomaniac flaunting his power and hiding behind a mask. Jameson essentially instigates a manhunt for Spider-Man's head. It's insane the lengths this son of a bitch goes sometimes to target and attack Spider-Man, directly and indirectly. And keep in mind, this is $1,000 in 1967 money, which is equivalent to over $8,000 today, adjusted for inflation. That's how much Jameson was willing to pay to put an end to Spider-Man. It's nuts. Anyways, Peter starts buying into all of Jameson's bullshit, feeling that only a fool would have taken the amounts of risks he has for people that don't even care about him. He wonders if his decision to fight crime all those years ago was made with the right intentions in mind, and not just for the thrill of battle, to have power over someone else far weaker than himself. So he decides to give up his crusade and quit being Spider-Man once and for all, throwing his Spider-Man costume in an alley's trash can and walking away from it in the rain, because why would it not be raining during a tragic moment like this? So sad. The next day, a youngster runs past Betty Brant at the Daily Bugle and enters Jameson's office, showing Jonah the costume of Spider-Man he had found in the trash. The child sells it to Jameson, who is overjoyed, believing he has finally won his war against the wall crawler. Jonah puts out an extra, which becomes one of the highest-selling tabloid newspapers in the Bugle's history. The topic of Spider-Man's apparent retirement gets a lot of media attention, being discussed on an episode of the Huntley-Brinkley News Report, and JJJ himself even appears on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, where Ed McMahon is seen holding up Spider-Man's costume. Spider-Man's disappearance leads to heated debates amongst New Yorkers. Some of them are glad he's gone, whereas others, who have supported the webhead since the very beginning, are heartbroken that their hero might never come back. The power vacuum Spider-Man's absence creates allows the criminals of New York's underworld to gather and strengthen, leading to a massive outbreak of crime within the city, being led and orchestrated by the Kingpin, who made his comic book debut within the Spider-Man No More storyline. From the onset, Kingpin was depicted as an extremely cunning criminal genius and strategist, in charge of so many moving pieces of his growing empire. He was a force to be reckoned with, like nothing Spider-Man had faced up until that point. Very quickly, Stan Lee and John Romita Sr. made sure to quell any assumptions readers might have had towards the character at first glance, by displaying the villain's surprising levels of agility despite his size, and explaining that his body was made up of 300 pounds of muscle as opposed to fat that many would have presumed. Another thing Spider-Man No More does regarding Kingpin is the whole idea of out with the old and in with the new. Prior to the debut of Kingpin in Spider-Man stories, there had been another powerful crime boss character, Frederick Foswell, known by his criminal name Big Man. After having been defeated by Spider-Man in The Amazing Spider-Man number 10 alongside his henchmen, the Enforcers, Foswell would make several more appearances in issues leading up to Spider-Man No More. Having seemingly reformed from his life of crime after being released from prison, he would begin working as a reporter for the Daily Bugle, and would often disguise himself as a petty criminal named Patch, in order to gain information on the underworld. When he learns of the Kingpin's existence, however, and his plans to take over the city, something Foswell had once tried to do himself, he goes to the offices of Kingpin to offer his guidance to him, I guess due to the envy he feels, knowing that Fisk has accomplished so much more than he ever will. Regardless, Kingpin is angered and insulted by Foswell, and nearly kills him with a disintegrating beam fired from his diamond-studded cane. Though he survives that, Foswell would meet his demise at the end of Spider-Man No More, when he would be shot and killed by one of Fisk's henchmen while trying to help Jonah Jameson escape from the underground tunnels beneath Kingpin's penthouse, having a bit of a redeeming moment, paying back the debt he owed Jameson for giving him a second chance at the Daily Bugle. I know I'm jumping to the end of the story a little bit here, but it's only briefly, because I wanted to bring up the fact that Spider-Man No More felt like a way for the creators to pass the torch from one villain to another that shared a very similar core concept. Frederick Foswell, Big Man, had sort of run its course as a character, and I think many elements of that villain were simply upgraded and expanded upon with the introduction of the Kingpin. It was an awesome idea, made even bigger and better, and with one now possessing far more potential, the other was not really required anymore, and, I guess, had to be eliminated. Anywho, let's get back to our pal Peter Parker. Because he had chosen to no longer be Spider-Man, his job at the Daily Bugle taking pictures of the webhead became unnecessary, so he quit. This upsets Jameson, who tells Peter he had always treated him like a son, with warmth and friendship. Ugh, if he only knew. Within days of his superhero retirement, Peter's life seems to improve, with him having time for his studies and time for his friends. But very quickly, he realizes that his friends don't always have time for him. Ain't that a kicker? Countless preventable crimes happen all around him as well, which constantly sets off his spider sense. Many of them Peter simply ignores, but one, involving some muggers attacking a night watchman for whatever reason, has Peter spring into action, as if it were fate at play. I say it was destined to happen because after saving the night watchman, Peter notices the man's features, having an uncanny resemblance to those of his late Uncle Ben. In this moment, Peter is reminded of the responsibility that comes with having incredible superhuman powers like his, no matter how great the personal sacrifice he must make. And obviously, Peter had not forgotten about his Uncle Ben, and the words of wisdom he had given him. How could he? It was just that he had become so frustrated with everything else going on in his life, became blinded by his emotions, and wasn't thinking as clearly as he could have been. It happens to a lot of us. Life gets in the way. Stressors present themselves. But after saving that watchman, Peter's drive to be a superhero is ignited once more, and he steals his costume back from Jameson's office, much to Jonah's chagrin. Spider-Man's comeback has him dealing with the recent influx of crime within New York, learning of this mysterious Kingpin character. Following a few unsuccessful interrogations, Spidey is able to locate Kingpin's hideout after placing a Spidey tracer on the coat of one of his henchmen. When Spider-Man does reach Fisk's penthouse, he finds JJJ had been taken prisoner by Kingpin's goons. Kingpin plans on eliminating Jameson because of all the negative press he has been printing about him at the Daily Bugle. Spider-Man faces off with Kingpin for the very first time, but is deceived by his size and pulls his punches, a decision he would quickly regret, because after breaking Kingpin's cane during their battle, Spider-Man is knocked unconscious by sleeping gas housed within Fisk's tie pin. Spider-Man and Jonah Jameson would then be shackled together in a sealed chamber by Kingpin's goons, which slowly begins filling with water. This death trap Spider-Man found himself in was very reminiscent of the one featured in The Amazing Spider-Man number 33 from the storyline If This Be My Destiny, which I have reviewed on the channel before, except this time the stakes are even higher, as Spider-Man is not only responsible for saving his own life, but the life of an enemy as well. And isn't it ironic that Jameson would die alongside the one man he hates more than anything, Spider-Man? Even while Spidey is working out a plan to rescue the two of them, Jameson still takes needless shots at him. I guess he's a douchebag to the very end. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, Spider-Man is able to save Jameson from drowning by creating an extra thick web ball around the two of them that creates an air bubble, allowing them to breathe. They simply wait it out until Kingpin's lackeys drain the room to dispose of the bodies. But of course, when they enter, they find Spider-Man and Jameson alive and well. After Spidey disposes of the goons, Jameson says Spider-Man only saved himself. It just so happens that he was along for the ride and inadvertently got saved as well. What a prick. Spider-Man finds and confronts the Kingpin once more, this time making sure to not underestimate him and to web up his tie pin so he can't use his sleeping gas again. The Kingpin is defeated, but manages to escape through a secret elevator hidden within his office bookshelf. Though Spider-Man saved the day in the end, he finds his reputation still in shambles. Regardless of his status in the eyes of those he helps, though, being a hero is what he set out to do, no matter what the cost. Spider-Man No More is a very remarkable Spider-Man story. It did something unheard of, something very few superhero narratives would have even attempted back in the day. The idea of a superhero giving up and throwing in the towel is rather inconceivable, because we always expect them to keep fighting, regardless of the obstacles put in front of them. But at their core, they are still human, still deal with personal setbacks, and seeing a hero become overwhelmed like Peter Parker was within this story, reaching their breaking point even for a brief moment, is very interesting, and makes their triumph over it all the more powerful in the end. While I do enjoy Spider-Man No More, and consider it to be one of the most significant comics in Spider-Man's rich and lengthy history as a character, it's not perfect by any means. Outside of the highly memorable visual where Peter throws his Spider-Man costume away, and of course the debut of Kingpin, the rest of it is kind of a mixed bag for me. This story arc is 3 issues long, but so much of it feels crammed into the first one, with Peter giving up being Spider-Man, dealing with the positives and negatives of that decision, saving the Night Watchman, and choosing to become Spider-Man once more, stealing his costume back from Jameson, all in the span of a single issue, The Amazing Spider-Man number 50. I feel like if this comic were to come out today, the pacing of it would be much better, stretched over the course of several issues, and given a lot more time to breathe. I also didn't enjoy how during the final battle between Spider-Man and Kingpin, the comic felt the need to show us Flash Thompson reuniting with his friends, returning from service in the Vietnam War. It felt like an unnecessary inclusion that took focus away from the main story during its climax of all times, which felt really odd and stuck out like a sore thumb. Not to mention, it dates this story a great deal and affects one's immersion. All the nitpicks aside, though, Spider-Man No More is still a classic, and I can see why many of its elements have been adapted in other forms of media over the years. It made a powerful impression on a lot of fans, and I'd love to hear what sort of impression it made on you, if you've read it, in its entirety. I want to thank you all for watching this comic review, and if you enjoyed it, think about subscribing to the channel and hitting that bell icon to be notified of all the future content I release. I will see you all in the next one. Take care and stay nerdy.